Well, that's a good note to start on. Greetings, Rink Rats, and welcome to Season 4, Episode 10 of the Blackhawks Rinkcast. Coming to you live from the Puck Hockey Studios and brought to you by Puck Hockey. PUCKHCKY, our founding and official sponsor since 2017. Head over to puckhockey.com, PUCKHCKY.com, and check out the latest in hockey-themed apparel and gear, including the exclusive Rink line. This is Puck Hockey. And the exclusive Rink line, the hats, the T-shirts, the baseball sleeves, the hoodies. Yes, all that. And a bag of chips, as they say, as the kids say. I am your host, John Jaeckel, better known across the interwebs as JJ or that Jekyll guy. With me tonight are the usual suspects minus Ray Napientek. But we have with us the blogger to be named later and the uncrowned, but definitely crowned at the same time, workhorse of the Rink Chicago chapter, Sean Fitzgerald, also known as Sean Goldstein.
Good evening. Thank you. Very excited to be here on a exciting day. I always wear a different hat, so today's hat is newest to my collection. It is a New Era Cubs with a gold C and the Notre Dame logo on the side. I was at the Cubs game on Monday, which was a cathartic experience. And I think they had a lot of colleges. None of the Wisconsin people would be happy. There was no Wisconsin hats, but other colleges. So happy to be here, happy to talk Hawks, but wearing the Cubs tonight.
You've just taken all the air out of Mario Tirabassi, who no doubt is listening to us as he prepares to watch.
He's a Brewers fan anyways. It doesn't matter.
That's right. And joining us also from the East Coast, from New England, our friend Andy Campbell. Andy, how are you, sir?
Doing well. Good to see you all again, and ready to talk Hawks, ready to talk big trade day today. A lot of action. They're playing tonight, and a lot of movement, a lot of excitement going on here.
Yes. I think Stan Bowman must have gotten wind that we had a Rinkcast rolling tonight and decided to make probably the biggest trade of the year thus far. We're going to unpack that one. We're going to also look at the now legendary Vince Hinostroza trade. And I use that modifier applying to both the player and the trade. And we'll unpack that, and then we'll talk about what it means for the trade deadline and the rest of the Hawks season. So yeah, today the Hawks shipped off Lucas Wallmark, who had not been in Chicago for terribly long. He is a center / forward, sort of a utility guy. And then they also sent along Lucas Carlsson, who's one of those young defensemen who I think some people thought he might have had a future in Chicago. I personally never saw him as more than, say, a number 7 defenseman on a good team. They sent those guys to Florida, to Bill Zito and Joel Quenneville, and they got back a pretty hefty return in defenseman Riley Stillman and forward, and I forget his first name now, Connelly.
Brent, Brent Connelly.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it was Hendrick Borgstrom was the return. And a 7th round pick. JJ is frozen, so that was the return for today's deal. Andy, what do you think?
And
sorry, go ahead, John. He's back.
So yeah, I was just catching up here technologically. Henrik Borgstrom, 7th round pick, Connelly, the player to be named later, and also Riley Stillman. So yeah, I'm going to ask you guys. I'm going to put it to you guys what you guys think, and we'll start with Sean.
Okay. I really like the deal. Stan Bowman weaponized his LTIR space a little bit, getting Brett Connelly in the deal. He's got $3.25 million for the next year plus, so he's got 2 years of that cap hit. Riley Stillman's, they're young. All the players in this deal are younger. Which is good. And basically, the Hawks didn't give up anything really of value. Lucas Wallmark cleared waivers. He was on a 1-year deal. Lucas Carlsson, like John said, was probably a 7th defenseman. It also meets the quota Stan Bowman loves former first-round picks. He loves acquiring them. Talent over what their playing status has been. So Hendrick Borgstrom is somebody to maybe get excited about. He's playing in Finland this year. So hopefully the European scouts have gotten their eyes on him, and that's why he was included in the deal. I really like the European scouts and what they have to think. I mean, Dominik Kubalik was scouted by the European scouts, and that's how we got him. Artemi Panarin, a lot of people were after him, but he was still scouted by them. Even players who didn't pan out in Chicago but are still playing in the NHL, Michael Kempny, Jan Ruda. So I really like the European scouts. But I like this deal. It's lottery tickets. It's young players. It fits in with the 1-year deal guys. We're going to trade them for lottery tickets and hopefully rebuild and build towards something in the future. So I like it.
Yeah.
Andy.
Yeah. No risk, high reward scenario here. I mean, Wallmark, I think the average Chicago Blackhawk fan right now is probably going, oh yeah, that guy. Remember when we signed him? I mean, he's just kind of a non-factor here. Didn't do a whole lot. Not that he's a bad hockey player, but clearly didn't fit in. Carlsson, same kind of deal, easily forgotten. And with so many younger defensemen, not part of the plan. You got Connelly, another former first-round draft pick. I can't say I'm totally thrilled about the 3.5 for the next 2 years, but, he is seasoned in some sense. He's played a lot of hockey. The other thing to think about too here is, they just gave up 2 players that weren't part of their plans. They added 3. Connelly's contract, if he comes in and performs, we are entering an expansion draft. He will not be protected. Seattle will have to hit the cap floor. So that's not a terrible contract to have,
right?
If that's someone who is going to move on from the Hawks. And I think, wasn't there a 7th round pick in there too that they got? They got a pick. Any lottery tickets are great, which is good. Riley Stillman, the kind of hockey he plays, he's not one of these. We don't think about him in the Mitchell Boquist mode where it's like, oh my God, another young, undersized puck moving defenseman. He plays hard. He plays tough. He'll see some NHL minutes. I don't know how many he'll see. And then the wild card in that, it's the Borgstrom, the guy who had an awesome career at DU. I really like Shawnee. I love your point. The last 2 years, the Hawks have struck gold on guys that have come over at the age of 24, which is how he would come over next year. He turns 24 in August. Those guys that are coming over, the Kubaliks and the Pius Suitors of the world, 24 years old with professional experience, a little bit more seasoned. You're not giving up on a 20, 21-year-old that so many NHL GMs do. So I like this. There's everything to gain here, nothing to lose. JJ, as you said earlier, a nothing to lose deal. And, so I think it's a good move. It's not a major splash. And if it doesn't work out, fine. You didn't lose anything here. So,
I have a lot of feelings about this. And generally my feeling is it is a no lose deal. I question how high the ceiling is as far as the return. I think if Borgstrom can end up panning out as a solid and functional third center in the NHL, this would be a win, because center's a weakness in this this organization, NHL level and in the pipeline. So he's got good size, 6'3", about 200 pounds. Where I kind of differ from you guys a little bit is as far as the pedigree of the European scouts. This is a guy who was playing at the University of Denver for 2 years before joining the Panthers in 2018. So I think Stan Bowman had a quote today that I want to come back to later on about what he saw when he watched Borgstrom play at the University of Denver. So I'm not sure that necessarily the fact that he's playing in Europe now equates him with like a Kubalik or a Dominik Kahun or a Artemi Panarin as far as that goes. I think he's been a known quantity to scouts here in North America for a while, to amateur scouts anyway. But I think, again, if he can become, he's known as a scorer. I'm not going to pretend to know a lot about his two-way game, but I think if he can win faceoffs, and if he can, play with a little bit of an edge and be responsible defensively, then maybe they've got something as far as a middle six-ish or third line center, and because he is a center. So that's the real upside here. Brent Connelly. Like Andy, I agree with you. I don't think the contract's that bad, really. I mean, and I know that I guess Bowman told some of the beat writers that his strategy going into the deadline was to, take on other teams' bad contracts and try to amass some futures. Well, he did that here as far as Borgstrom in the 7th round pick. He amassed the futures, but I don't think he took on that bad of a contract. I mean, let's look at it this way. And I was thinking about this today. I mean, Connelly, at $3.5 million for the next 2 years, he scored 22, 23 goals a couple of years ago for Florida. So, I mean, Alex DeBrincat is making $6.5 million. He had 19 goals last year. So now again, he's having a great year this year. But the point is, Connelly's a guy that can put the puck in the net a little bit and contribute offensively. I don't think he's a road grader style-wise. I think he's a guy who could probably use his size better. But and Stillman, I agree. I mean, I think he's one of those guys that I think Bowman likes to bring guys like this. I mean, another example of a guy like this is Anton Lindhold, who we brought in from Colorado. I know Bowman's had his eye on him for a few years. It'll be interesting to see how much playing time he gets and what kind of role they give him. And maybe they're also looking at, Calvin DeHaan not being around next year, who is, probably their most true defensive defenseman. And maybe they think Stillman can backfill that a little bit. And I do get the sense with Connelly and Stillman is they're thinking maybe these guys might have, a change of scenery and a type of thing happen where they will play better here. And then there's been some conjecture that Connelly is going to be exposed in the expansion draft.
Right.
And that could make some sense too. So, but all things considered, I agree with you guys. I think it is a no lose at minimum, and maybe there's an upside to it, So let's pivot a little bit. I mean, what do you guys think about what this means about the Hawks? Let's talk about before we get into that, let's talk about the Hinostroza deal, because I'm still scratching my head a little bit over that one. I'm not entirely sure what he was thinking, but I will say this, based upon how Hinostroza has played briefly since he's returned, is that, maybe Hinostroza has kind of gotten the memo that he's not going to be a top 6 player in the NHL. And if he plays with a lot of energy and is difficult to play against, he could have maybe a Chris Draper light type of career ahead of him in Chicago. And I got to be honest with you, I think if he can do that, if he can do that consistently, that could be a really interesting niche for him to occupy in Chicago. Because he's got that speed, and he's a little bit of a fire plug. So I'm going to throw that around to you guys. What do you guys think about Vinny Hinostroza coming back? Andy?
Yeah, he looked great the other night. I mean, that's exciting. New number 28, buzzing around out there, had a nice assist. I mean, that's great. I don't know. You wonder, did he demand for a trade or something? I mean, he was quoted. He was so excited to return, back home and what it meant for his family. But I mean, Talon didn't ask much to move Hinostroza. That's for sure. I mean, I certainly don't think Morrison is going to pan out to be very much. So, it might end up just being a guy for a guy if he can embrace a bottom 6 role. Again, another move that's low risk. I mean, his contract is up at the end of this year. So if things don't really work out, and I believe, and I do not know this, is it contract or no contract for your UFAs to be are still exposed for the expansion draft? Is that true? Am I reading that situation correctly?
I think you're right. I think that's if it's still the Vegas rule. So I think you're right on that.
Okay. Because if that is the case, that's another body that they're not going to protect that's available. I think it's fine to stockpile players to give an expansion team a lot of different options to choose from as they're making their mix. But JJ, to your point, I mean, if he can embrace a bottom 6 role, if he can amend his game to be a little bit more defensive and, be opportunistic at the other end of the ice when he's given the chance. Again, I mean, none of these are big splashers, none of these are going to, wow the fan base. They're kind of the minor detail oriented moves. And, I don't know, but we've talked about it before. I mean, I what is it, 7 or 8 players in like the last 5 or 6 years that Stan has brought back for a second tour of duty.
It's a requirement, I think.
With the Blackhawks, and how many of those players have hit on their second tour? Maybe one, and that's Brandon Saad. But again, that was post Cup, so they didn't win on that second tour, and he was, Saad did okay. I think people were still in love with the 13 and 2015 Brandon Saad, and so they gave him a little bit more of a leash when there were games when he was invisible. So I don't think they're going to hit on Strome. We know they didn't hit on Strome, but so I don't think they're going to hit on Hinostroza. But another body, kind of whatever.
Sean, what do you think?
So Hinostroza, what I read was Hinostroza, the general manager of the Panthers, basically knew Hinostroza was going to play in Florida, and so he'd appeared in like 6 games or something minuscule. And they knew they weren't going to play him, so they basically called up the Blackhawks and said, "Do you want him? We'll take whatever in return." And Hinostroza is so excited just to be playing in the NHL again. Like I think he was on their taxi squad. He wasn't even playing. I think this move is actually like a predecessor to another move. I think Hinostroza is backfilling a spot that isn't open yet.
Probably.
Because if you look at it, like Hinostroza, there really isn't a place for him right now. But if they move somebody like Carl Soderberg or somebody else, like there's another spot in the lineup that opens up.
Yeah.
I will say, JJ, I agree with you and with you, Andy, that if he embraces that fire plug role, he's always had the speed. If he embraces that, then yeah, he has a niche in the NHL. He's not going to be what we all thought he was coming out, and maybe he's finally embraced that. And I mean, you look at like Tyler Mott. Tyler Mott took forever to embrace it, but now he's in the NHL, played a bunch, played with Toronto and Columbus, and has a role in the NHL. You just gotta find a role and be willing to embrace it and run with it.
Yeah, I mean, guys, I think you guys know this. I mean, the NHL, especially the lower lines in the NHL, are basically chock full of guys who pumped in goals at the lower levels, And I'll give you a really good example of a guy who if he'd ever gotten this message, probably could have been a really good fourth line player, like an energy player, and that was Jack Skinley. Skinley, he was just not a terribly skilled player, but he could skate, and he was very athletic. He had he had an NHL body, as they say. But he always, whenever you watch him play, he was always just kind of like playing rat hockey. He was like circling center ice, waiting for the pass for the breakaway, And I think he got a lot of chances with a lot of teams, but he always was that fourth line forward trying to play a first line role. So for a guy like Hinostroza, especially if Colleton could kind of get through to him and say, look, you could have a good career, but you've got to really accept this role. And that's what it comes down to for guys like that, guys who scored a lot of goals. Like, Hinostroza, he's never scored that many. In the USHL, he was basically a point a game guy in the USHL, but and then one year he had 18 at Rockford, and that was when all.
Yeah, I don't think he scored that much at Notre Dame either. I know he played for Notre Dame his freshman year and then went to the World Championships.
Yeah. He only played there a couple. I don't know if he played 2 years at Notre Dame.
I think he was only there for a season.
Yeah,
I think he signed.
Yeah.
That's when they signed him, Anthony Lewis. They signed like all their Chicago kids that year.
Yeah, that's right. Remember that.
Yeah. So I think for him, because he seems like a good, and he's a bowling ball, and he's really a really speedy guy, and maybe he got a niche for himself on the Hawks lower lines, and I think the Hawks need guys like that. They need guys who are tough, who create problems, in those energy roles. So, as opposed to the Zach Smiths of the world who, could have been that, a year ago,
Sounds like JJ just cut out.
Yeah.
He'll be back in a little bit, which is cool. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, who knows? Maybe Hinostroza can be around for a few years, like we talked about, embrace that role and be an asset. We'll find out.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully he shouldn't be that expensive because he's an RFA at the end of this year, but I mean, there's not going to be a huge market. It's kind of like who's the Anthony Duclair? He's like Anthony Duclair in that regard too. They're not going to be that expensive. If he can just embrace his role, he can be fine.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go run out and buy a Vince Hinostroza shirt though from the Blackhawks.
I'm not going to be hung up on him. That's for sure.
No.
If it was Tanner Caro, I'd be all over it, but that's another story.
Right. Or who was the other? Oh, Alex Fortin.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
He was my guy for about a year and a half.
Yep.
But anyway,
Red Deer.
Right.
Love
so
it.
pivoting from Fortin was Alex Fortin was from
Was it?
was from QMJ.
Oh, that's right. He was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your dad.
Anyway, so let's pivot away from these future Hall of Famers, and because I don't think that the Hinostroza deal says much about Bowman's strategy at the trade deadline, but I do think today's deal does. You know, that they're going to try to take on some bigger contracts that teams are looking to get rid of and gain some futures in the process. And there was a quote from Bowman today that said that he's getting a lot of calls, and if there's a couple more deals to make, he's going to make them. And my question, you know, looking at what they did, I don't think they hurt themselves as far as the potential postseason this year with this deal. I don't think they particularly helped themselves either.
No.
And I guess, is this what they're going to do? What do you guys think? Is this what they're going to do leading up to the trade deadline? Is kind of, you know, as far as, you know, NHL assets kind of just sort of go 50-50 and maybe try to gain a couple of assets. Still feels to me like they're keeping the door open to get in the playoffs, and they're not going to just go into full sell mode. Andy, what do you think?
I don't, you know, what'll be interesting is it would seem like, and we can all speculate that Stan was on the phone about Carl Soderberg at some point, with Carl Soderberg not in the lineup the last couple games. He's playing tonight. Who knows if that was a conversation that was going on with Dale Talon before the trade was made, or if he was in conversations with another team. He had to have been. I don't know why. You know, it's not as if you are going to try to make this last push for the postseason that scratching Carl Soderberg makes any sense. So Soderberg might be someone that they're still dangling out there if they could get the right return for a suitor that really starts to, you know, need something or maybe get a little bit desperate, you know, before the deadline. So I don't know. I know we talked about this a few weeks ago, and Shawnee, you and I were in agreement on this. So we just said, I don't really think they're going to do a whole lot. And this might be it. I don't know if there will be more. You know, I think it's the Soderberg one is the one. Soderberg and Janmark are the two.
Yeah.
You know, there are all these, you know, maybe some Twitter rumors about Duncan Keith. Duncan Keith is not going to waive his trade clause. I do not believe he will do that. At all. I think he's very happy where he is. I just don't see it. Those two are the ones that I would eye as potential moves. And the one sleeper in this whole thing, and hear me out, because I know some people are going to go, oh my God, you're crazy. And what are you saying about this? But if you can, and you can, Stan Bowman, if you can move Dylan Strome to a willing taker in return for a $50 gift card at an Outback Steakhouse, I'm all for it. I mean, if Stan Bowman wants to treat himself to a nice meal, and that means we don't have to watch Dylan Strome anymore, what's wrong with that?
And a discount on paper products. It could be Meredith Palmer.
What is wrong with that? I don't see anything wrong with that whatsoever. So, you know, something to think about, something to consider.
Sean, I think back to Dylan Strome. I swear to God, Andy, I thought you were going to say $50 gift card to Applebee's. I swear to God.
Oh, the bee.
One restaurant away. Yeah.
Sean, tell me, right across the parking lot from La
right.
Sean, what do you think about the Hawks draft strategy? What does this say about it? Or excuse me, not draft strategy, trade deadline strategy. Sorry, getting ahead. So,
it's definitely forward thinking. Even with acquiring Brett Connelly, he's still forward thinking in that maybe he could expose him in the expansion draft. So regardless of who he acquires for Soderberg or Janmark, I think it's all going to be forward thinking. I don't think it's anything to make the team better this season. Mm-hmm. I think that's what he showed with that trade. Because I mean, Connolly's maybe a change of scenery guy, Riley, Stedman is maybe a bottom pairing defenseman right now. So, and obviously Borgstrom is a future asset. So that's what I think he's thinking. So if they get somebody for Carl Soderberg, if it's anybody at the NHL level, it's either somebody on an expiring contract or somebody that can expose the expansion draft along with other assets. I don't think Stan's going to do what we thought he was going to do a couple of weeks ago, where he was going to trade and try to win in the same move. I think this deal shows that he's not going to do that. I think he's going, if he has to take NHL players back, he will, but he's got something in mind for them, whether it's change of scenery, making them better, exposing them in the expansion draft, or ultimately just being a placeholder until hopefully one of his draft picks pans out. So that's what I'm thinking. And I think Soderberg and Janmark are the two guys that for sure should move. I'm pushing for them to move Colin Delia, give the guy an opportunity someplace else, whether it's you trade him now or hopefully Seattle takes him, because if for whatever reason they're not going to play him over Malcolm Subban ever. And Kevin Lankinen might get every start for the rest of the year. So, yeah,
as he probably should.
Yep.
So I think these are great comments. Going back, Andy, to your comment about Duncan Keith, I really had sort of given up some point in the last couple of months. I'd given up all hope of a full-on rebuild, tear down rebuild, which is what I've been pushing for 2 years. I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think this front office is prepared for the financial hit that it'll take, over a couple of years to do that. And fine, whatever. It's not my money. I'm not managing the books.
And Stan gave away no movement clauses like Applebee's gift cards.
Right. Crapplebee's.
Right. And really, they're really going to be pinched. I mean, they're going to have to sell tickets next year.
Well, that's what they're doing. And I'm going to come back to that too. Okay. But, the one thing I will say, they've done these 2 deals now with Florida. Bill Zito, who, Bowman has a relationship with going back to his days as an agent and also his days as the assistant GM in Columbus, who was a regular trade partner, Stan Bowman's as well. The one place I could see Duncan Keith waving for is Florida, because of who Stan, the guy behind the guy with the mustache behind the bench. And the fact that Florida's got a really good team and they've got the potential to go pretty deep. And now Florida has that need, in their top 4 with Ekblad being out. So I'm not saying it will happen, but there's a few dots connecting there, and I haven't heard anything to say that that's going to happen, but it will not surprise me hugely if there's an announcement at some point that Duncan Keith has agreed to waive his no movement clause to go to Florida. Q, if he has any input on it, even though Keith has that funky contract with all the, with those recapture clauses, et cetera, this is a guy who could easily play into his 40s. If there's any guy in the NHL who could play into his 40s, maybe diminished a little bit as he already is, but it's Duncan Keith just because of the kind of athlete he is. And I think Q would say, look, let's roll the dice and do it, because this is a guy I can plug in and, can do what I want to do defensively. And as far as, main gaps in our up and down the ice. So I'm just saying. And Gate said the same thing in our Rink chat this week too.
Yeah, it's one of those. I'll believe. If I was going to pick someone, it's the same. It would be the same team and the same deal. It's one of those. I believe it when I see it. It's been something I've been hoping for. A lot of Hawk fans have been hoping for a number of years for him to waive it and move on. But Florida's going to do something else too. I mean, they did just dump Connelly's contract.
Yeah, they're
freeing up money. Yeah, they're freeing up money to do something.
Right. And if they do acquire Keith, we'd have to get more money coming back, because I think Keith's contract hit, I think it's like $5.5 million. Yeah. So they'd have to get something coming back. But if he's willing to waive it and Q's going to take him, why not? Right.
It's an awful lot of dealing with 2 clubs.
I think the Hawks are only allowed to trade with Columbus, Carolina, and Florida. I think that's the rules.
Those are the takers.
And they have, in any of those deals, they have to reacquire a former Blackhawk under the Stan Bowman era.
Yeah, maybe Marco Dano's out there somewhere. I mean,
maybe. Marco Dano.
Marco Dano was another guy I was briefly in love with, just because
Yeah, I was excited about that originally too.
he had that stretch of like just 10 like ungodly games for Columbus at the end of the previous year. And I'm like, yeah, get that guy.
Yeah.
And wow, no.
Anyway, Radislav Olesh, that was another
yeah.
He was another project there. The post
Yeah.
the first cup. Jeez.
Yeah.
Former first round picks always coming back.
There you go.
Stan loves them. Skilly for Frolik.
Feaster.
That was a good trade. That was actually a really good.
Oh, that's probably Stan's best like reclamation first round former pick coming back.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Andy's guy Dylan Strome was one. That's not going to work out.
No.
Alex Nylander, who's doing knee lifts right now to get his knee in shape. That's not going to work out.
I guess what would we put on the Stan Bowman hit list in a positive sense? Okay, so we got Frolik. The Vermette trade. I mean, Antoine Vermette. That
was good.
That probably might be number one. And granted, it took Kane getting hurt and going on the LTR to get it done. But you know, he does have a small greatest hits album.
Oh, how about Hanzus?
Hanzus was a good one.
I remember
Richards was big.
Yeah,
you could go Johnny Oduya.
Johnny Oduya was that was a nice deal.
And he only gave up second round picks, second or third rounders. So he didn't give up anything. He didn't give up first round for Oduya.
Right. That was actually
and honestly, I mean, yeah, I've always said that, Bowman inherited the core. And the core is really what won the cups. But I will always give him marks for some nice moves there in the 2013, 2014 range there. He had a few really nice moves as far as the complimentary guys. And you got to give him credit for that. I wouldn't call that winning a cup per se, because again, without that core, none of them would have happened. But
it was good, good
he
along
really
the edges.
did a nice job on those.
Yeah, Victor Stahlberg was a nice edge guy. He was an edge guy. Like he was a salary dump that you got something for him.
Yeah, a lot of guys get on Stan too because they think that he can't draft. And I think it was the one draft, the 2011 draft, where it was Teravainen.
No, it was McNeil, Deneau, and Saad.
Oh, McNeil, Deneau.
2011.
Okay.
Yeah, Teravainen was 2012, I think.
2012, but then
2014, I think, was Teravainen.
But
he was
but Deneau and Saad, like if he wouldn't have given up on Deneau, like he would be playing. He'd be your third line center right now.
That one will haunt me forever.
That one hurts me.
The Deneau trade to Montreal,
especially because they gave it up for Weiss and
Bill Weiss and Thomas Meatman Fleischman.
Man, God, that's bad.
Translated from German as Meatman.
Well, Shaw was a 5th round pick in 2011 or something like that. I mean, that was.
Shaw was a fifth round pick in 2011 too. That was a really good draft. So let's pivot away from this stroll down Stan Bowman's greatest hits lane, if you will. I don't know where that was going. That wasn't very good. I should probably quit now. But let's talk for a minute. Andy, I don't know how serious you were about Strome being traded. I think we've touched on this in the past. So I think I would look for that being a possibility, perhaps before the trade deadline.
I think more. You mentioned it before. I think more entering the draft possibility.
The draft. Sorry, that's what I meant to
say. I think definitely that's a real possibility to move him then. And I hope so. And I mean, I'll joke.
So it will be interesting.
Yeah, would love to see that happen.
Right.
And I think you still could get something.
What if they exposed him? Would Seattle take him? I think they might.
They might. I don't know. I would tell them not to.
I mean, if Seattle took him, maybe they make a deal like Vegas did. We'll take Dylan Strome, but you also have to give us something else in addition to Dylan Strome. Similar to what Vegas did with they take TVR, and then we gave them Marcus Kruger, and then they flipped them both to Carolina.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, as much as we the collective Rink, we are down on Dylan Strome, I gotta think, for especially like an expansion team like Seattle, he's a guy with obvious offensive gifts. Now, work ethic on and off the ice, highly questionable. Mobility, highly questionable. But if they want a guy that they can, a creative guy that they can have on their top lines first couple of years they're in business, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, he'd only be on the hook for 1 year too. I mean,
right.
And they need to hit the floor. It'd be a 1-year reclamation project,
right?
To try to see if they could resuscitate his career. And then if they don't, no one is they're no fools. They just move.
And he re-signs with the Blackhawks for 1 point something million.
Right. Yeah, he'll be back.
Yeah, but I don't know. It depends on. I don't know how the draft order works either. Like, I don't know or do they just submit a sheet and just say these are the guys we want and these are who we're taking?
Yeah. The other thing about
is it like? Yeah. Well, no, I don't know how it works. Is it like now you get to pick from this team, now you get to pick from this team, or do you submit a sheet to the NHL saying these are the guys, this is who we want? And I don't know, and I don't know if like DeHaan is not protected, and they want to make a point to stabilize their blue line. I still think that might be someone who might. And again, I don't, and if that is the case, the Hawks might be wise at the draft to move one of those two guys.
I think DeHaan has more value, I think, to some teams. Sure. Definitely. But the other thing is we're sitting here assuming that the Hawks would expose Strome. I don't know that they would.
Oh.
I think Bowman likes him. He's one of Bowman's guys.
Bowman really likes him.
Former 3rd overall pick. Come on, like the talent is there.
I really hope you do not protect him. I agree with you, JJ. That might happen. Yeah. Bowman does really like him. I just yikes.
Yeah, I don't know. So let's pivot a little bit here, and let's talk about Stan Bowman a little bit because there was an interesting quote. Mark Lazarus tweeted it this afternoon from Stan Bowman on Hendrick Borgstrom, and I want to just sort of throw this out and as a topic of discussion because it kind of crystallizes some things that we talk about a lot on the podcast. But I think that I want to start documenting this because it's becoming too repetitive. Quote, Hendrick Borgstrom was, quote, one of the best college players I've seen in the last 10 years, Stan Bowman said.
Ooh.
Quote, he seemed destined for greatness in the NHL, unquote. Now, I want to remind you, we are going to go down Stan Bowman memory lane here to 2018. I believe it was January-ish when Stan Bowman said he was on the record that the team's big trade deadline acquisition that season was going to be getting Dylan Strome from Northeastern University. Last year, he said of Ian Mitchell, we thought Ian was ready to play in the NHL last year. Fast forward to this year, and he's playing in the AHL. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that Ian Mitchell is going to be as disappointing as Dylan Strome. I don't think he will be, actually. I think he's going to end up probably being at least a pretty good player.
Yeah, he'll be fine.
But Stan Bowman is showing a repeated tendency to, I think, gild the lily, so to speak, in terms of, really hyping guys that he acquires. And in some ways, I think there's an argument that he's setting them up for failure in terms of fan perception because he's building expectations so high. But then I also feel like is Stan Bowman's job basically to just rah-rah and spin this positive narrative no matter what happens, even when nothing at all has happened. I mean, Hendrick Borgstrom has not played a game in Chicago yet. And yet, you're talking about him like he's and the other thing is that Bowman seems to be really fixated on how well guys play in college as really an indicator of NHL success. And it's really usually not. So I just want to throw this out to you guys, get your feelings on this. I mean, you guys know that I try to be fair with Stan Bowman. At the same time, his spin tactics really are starting to get on my nerves. And I know they're getting on Gates' nerves. And I just think that the fan base needs to start being more aware of this and seeing it for what it is. Go.
Yeah. Go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah. Hendrick Borgstrom played college the last year he played college was 2017, 2018. He's played 58 games in the NHL already. I'm excited for his potential, but I don't care what he did at Denver. Like that was what, 4 years ago?
Yeah.
4 years ago, I was 180 pounds. I'm over 200 pounds now. I'm not the same guy I was 4 years ago.
Congratulations.
It doesn't matter 4 years ago.
Yeah.
That's like saying in college, I could run it under 5 minutes in the mile, and now I can run like 10 minutes. Like, it doesn't matter. They don't equate. So that, and I think the hype machine for Stan Bowman really started to take shape when Teuvo Teravainen was a prospect. I think, and Teuvo was actually a good prospect and actually a good player, but he hyped him to the moon, to the point where when Teuvo wasn't single-handedly winning games when he emerged in the NHL, you were like, is he kind of a bust? Is he not as good as we thought he was? As far as Dylan Sikura, everybody kind of bought that hype. I remember reading articles saying that they thought Dylan Sikura, other teams thought Dylan Sikura could play in the top 6 in the NHL but by his senior year at Northeastern. So Stan Bowman, though, I think he ultimately his job is a PR guy too. Like, he's the face. He's got to spin the narrative. Transparency is a very rare thing in sports, and it's not received all that well. You look at you look at the New York Rangers. They told everybody they were going to be bad and rebuild. I mean, that takes a lot of gumption and a lot of courage to say that.
I thought that was such a smart move. I still respect that.
It's brilliant.
Absolutely.
But it takes a lot of courage. Like, I'm not going to go
honest.
But it's, full transparency. I just think that's key. I mean, I guess the good thing right now is Stan Bowman hasn't thrown out too much hype about Lucas Reichel. So maybe that kid, people will give him a little bit of a lifeline if he doesn't come in and wow right away. I mean, I really hope Stan doesn't start talking about him. But I mean, this is a really bizarre, I don't know, like contagious issue not contagious because it doesn't rub off, but I mean a chronic issue for Stan Bowman, I guess you can say. I mean, he loves his superlatives around players that he really doesn't know that much about. Maybe someone, I don't know, maybe a scout is feeding him info on this guy, or maybe they're just saying, look, PR is just being like, look, we need to justify the move. The public needs to know. Pump the tires a little bit.
Season tickets are down. Let's start pumping the tires.
Does he ever look right? Exactly. Yeah, right. We need tickets for next year. But does he ever just look at somebody and be like, guys, like I can't say these things after what I did with Artem Anisimov. So can you just let me off the hook here, please? Talk about your ultimate blunders.
Andy, where you're going is kind of where I want to take this, and that is, there comes a point at which your credibility is damaged.
Right.
And Sean, you brought up a great thing, Teravainen. It did start back then. And here's the thing that's interesting. That was at a time when the Blackhawks needed to start really thinking about the next generation. And they needed to start thinking about where, that was in 2014. And that was when Jonathan Toews was taking an absolute beating in the playoffs. And I think perhaps at that point, they're looking at guys like Toews and Hjalmarsson and Holsted saying, how much longer are these guys going to be around? And do we need to start really looking at that next generation? And I think that also, aside from the Brandon Saad pick, which had been hailed as a big steal, Bowman also was suffering a little bit from the comparisons to Dale Talon, who had gotten the credit, rightly so, mostly him and Mike Smith, actually his predecessor, for assembling that core. And I think that's like the chip on Bowman's shoulder is, I want the world to see me as a brilliant talent evaluator and acquirer. And that's why he always, when he gets these guys, and you brought up Artem Anisimov, another case in point, you trade for him, and what do? You turn around the next day and give him this massive deal with a no movement clause a year before he's due. Mm-hmm. Why? So you can rubber stamp and validate the move you just made.
Yeah. And this without even seeing how he fits in with the team. Never skated before he did that.
Right.
Play a minute with the team before that extension. Right. Just a categorical disaster. I mean, we're just a mess. I mean, that is inexcusable.
And here's the problem. I think Bowman better start to realize that when he says these things to beat reporters and it goes out in tweets, he's giving people like us receipts.
Yeah.
And we're going to be fair. I mean, we just spent a good 5 minutes talking about all the great things that Stan Bowman has.
Right.
But we're going to, but at the same time, I mean, if Borgstrom ends up being, the second coming of, let's say Lucas Wallmark, seriously, I mean, if he ends up being a guy, just a guy and never really becoming a player, even a third run, a third line center, which on a good team is a really valuable thing. Yeah. If he ends up not being that, are these things going to come back ultimately to haunt Bowman? And the bottom line is, I do believe, because I've followed this team now for many more years than I care to admit on this broadcast, but the fans of this team, I think they've seen the highs and the lows for many years, and I have a feeling that at some point, if they don't, if they don't continue to progress after this year, people are going to remember these things, and they're not going to. And if Ian Mitchell struggles, et cetera, I mean, all these things can come back to haunt them. So, Sean, what do you think?
Yeah, general managers and front office people. There are going to be there's receipts for everything you say now. If you're a public figure, if you tweet it out, if you put it on Facebook, you can't wipe that away, no matter how hard you try to do it. And people are going to call you to the carpet for it. Like, ultimately, Stan Bowman keeps pumping the tires of so many guys, and heaven forbid Kirby Dach doesn't work out, or Kirby Dach is not who we think he's potentially going to be, and Stan keeps pumping him. Eventually it's going to cost him his job. Stan Bowman eventually is going to be unemployed. And I don't want to go back to the days where Bill Wirtz was telling us that he couldn't put games on TV because nobody went to the arena. I don't want to be told those things. I don't want to be given that level of garbage from management in the front office. And Stan's starting to approach that transparency. I also think it's ego with him. He went to Notre Dame. He's so smart. He's smarter than all of us. He knows best. His evaluation, his rubber stamp is all we need. We don't need anybody else's approval. He's the one who won the 3 Stanley Cups, and it's all about him.
Yeah, but and we've said this before. I mentioned this before on a podcast. In 2017, when they lost to the Predators in 4 straight games, when they had the best record in the Western Conference that year.
Yeah, right.
Stan Bowman gets up in front of a microphone and he says, "This is absolutely below standard, inexcusable. We will not stand for this kind of an exit ever again."
Right.
And then what followed were 2 straight non-playoff seasons. Last season, which was a non-playoff season before COVID hit, and they changed the format where the Hawks ended up having a play-in series to get into the playoffs, but had the season continued, they would not have made the playoffs. And then this year, if and when they don't make the playoffs again, Stan Bowman got up in front and talked about how a first-round exit is below standards, will not be tolerated. And now we're looking at a 4th straight non-playoff team.
They could make it. They could
make it. But again, it's just kind of like, well, then what are we doing? And to your point, JJ, that's the receipt that I hold on to the most.
Yeah. And I agree.
That's the one where it's like, and and ultimately, Shawnee, what's going to cost him his job? I don't know if much will. What shouldn't have it happened already?
Well, but also think about this. So the Blackhawks window in Chicago was 2010, 09 to 15. That was when they were the hottest ticket in town. You couldn't touch those tickets. The building was full every night. We don't make the playoffs again this year, and we keep trending in that direction. Seats are going to start being empty.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say.
And that's what's going to cost him his job, because ultimately
10 to 15,000 people in the building a night.
It's going to be the Bill Wirtz era again. 10 to 15,000.
That awesome Pat Foley quote, "You can shoot a cannon in the United Center and not hit anybody," when he was talking about those very lean late 90s, early 2000s years.
I used to go with my high school ID and get tickets for $15 in the 300 level, and then
so awesome though.
Then sneak down. A a girl I dated in high school had friends who were ushers at the United Center. We sat in the 100 level, just above the glass, to see because nobody was there.
Yeah.
Like I could have picked any row and I felt guilty about it.
Right. I mean, I guess like I realize I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth tonight. I mean, I went on a Stan's greatest hits tour earlier, and now we're talking about, now we're bashing him, but for the record, I'm not a big Stan Bowman fan. I brought up those extra hits more as asterisks, but I guess it's just, where's the accountability?
Right.
That's all it is. It's just like, who's accountable?
I think we have to, Andy, you say something really important, and I think we have to keep it in perspective. We are having this Rinkcast tonight on a night when Stan Bowman's made probably a decent trade. And so we have to give him credit for that. And it does seem a little odd that we're talking about, his job security after that. But it's the things he says. And Andy, you said it, you use a perfect term, the superlatives he applies. That just seem, because I can hear people out there going, Jaeckel, what do you want him to say? Well, here's what I want him to say. Borgstrom is a guy that we've had our eye on for a while. He's shown a lot of potential at the lower levels. We think he can still develop, and we're excited to see where that might go. That's all you have to say. It's the building up of these guys larger than life and creating these expectations that I feel like at some point that's going to, all those bills are going to come due for Stan at some point, especially if things start to go the other way the next couple of years, which I think is still quite possible. There's some positives coming out of this year. Lankinen is the big one for me. Some of the younger guys like Suter, for example, sure. But man, I don't think Jonathan Toews is coming back, guys. I just don't. I think the jury's still out on how good Kirby Dach will become. DeBrincat could take a step back next year, just like he took a step up this year. Patrick Kane's getting older. Duncan Keith's getting older. So the point is, I just think that Bowman is making a mistake by doing this, and I think he's actually kind of sabotaging the players. I mean, people might have given Dylan Strome a little bit more time if they hadn't been led to believe he was going to be so great right out of the box.
Yeah.
And
mistake.
Finally on this, with regard to the empty seats, you know what, I lost my train of thought, so I'm going to stop on that. And we're getting close to the 9 o'clock hour here. Guys, do you have anything else you want to add on this before we shut it down?
Hendrick Borgstrom's nickname in college was the artist.
Yeah, artist. That's key. I love that.
Enter the artist. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah. We'll see how artful he is in Chicago.
Yeah, and how we're always talking about our favorites.
Alexa, but, stop.
Josiah Slavin already has 4 points in his first 3 games.
Nice.
Which is nice, courtesy of the new and improved Steve Maltese, also known as Brandon Peary.
Right. Steve Maltese 2.0.
Yeah, Maltese 2.0, which is cool. But the other thing, and I don't know, at some point down the road, I'd love to, on a podcast or this group, just talk about just in general, as far as the Blackhawks, the core and some of the members, and this very quick and abrupt demise with regards to health and the price of winning almost.
Yep.
And so, we've touched base on this briefly, but all those times that those guys played through things that and we don't know what they were playing through. We don't know what they were told to play through. We don't know what they voluntarily signed waivers for to play through. But, we've got this glory years that don't seem so far away. And then in one season, we're talking about the end of the careers in the last few months of Corey Crawford, Brent Seabrook, and then quite possibly Shaw and Jonathan Toews. And it just makes you wonder, like, what did these guys go through, on the ice? And it's just an interesting, I wonder if I don't know, years down the road, if we're going to find out more about that, but it just begs the question, like that price of winning. And, I guess from the fan side, we should be thankful that they went through all that stuff to give us that glory that we also desperately wanted at the time. But it's tough to see it, to see these things happen. It doesn't hit the right chord when you're like, oh, all of these guys. It's just, I don't know.
It's a lot of hockey. Those guys played 2013, they were in the playoffs. In 2010, they went all the way to the cup. That's a lot of grueling physical hockey. And a lot of them played the Olympics in 2010.
Yep.
2011, first round, 7 games. 2012, first round, I believe it was 6 games. 2013, cup. 2014, Western Conference Finals, game 7.
Yep.
Brutal run of playoffs. And the Western Conference Final against LA, brutal series, super physical.
Yeah.
They got really beat up. I was told at that time that Hossa, Hjalmarsson, and Taves were all playing with injuries that in the regular season they never would have played with.
Yeah.
2015, another cup. And
Yeah.
I think after 2015, I just think some of those bills started coming due.
Oh yeah,
and the back injury and
Yeah.
Keith with the knee injury, and Seabrook just quote unquote fell off a cliff. And I think that all those bills really started to come due. And I do think, Andy, we should have a segment on that soon, because we could talk about that, because I think it would be instructive for a lot of fans to understand how brutally physical NHL hockey is, and especially if you want to be a good team.
Yeah, well, I mean, they sacrificed. I mean, when you think about that 2015 team, they ran 4D through the playoffs.
Right. Yep. After Michael Roosevelt.
You remember Ryan Kessler? I remember him publicly being like, "They're not going to beat us. There's no way they can continue."
His quote was, "No humans can physically sustain the amount of hits we're giving them." Something that accord.
And Hjalmarsson, Oduya, and Seabrook. That was the pinnacle. That was it. Yeah. I mean, after that, they have not been the same hockey players since that.
No.
And John, you forgot, most of that team went to the Western Conference Finals in 2009. Also, didn't some of them play in the World Cup of Hockey?
Yep.
In between that, I think the World Cup of Hockey was before.
Yep.
1 year, and then the lockout shortened year of 2013 with those
gave him a minor breather. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, because Marian Hossa was recovering from shoulder surgery, and after Rafi Torres nearly ended his life.
Yeah.
Against Arizona.
Phoenix.
Also, I think there's an appreciation for longevity. I think when you see that all these guys, like longevity in the NHL, some guys just play forever. Like Duncan Keith may play till he's 40, like you said, John, and he was a part of all those. So it's sad, and we have to appreciate what those guys go through, but then we also have to look at the guys who've sustained and still are playing after that too, I think, a little bit.
Right. Yep. All right. This is good stuff. This is a great conversation tonight, and we will revisit this topic soon. I'm working on getting a friend of mine who's a goalie coach with the Columbus Blue Jackets to come on the show and talk to us about. I've also had the unique opportunity to have him work with both of my sons, and
nice.
And I want to just really delve into. I mean, the rink is all about hockey and going deep on hockey, and we like to do that when we can and talk about the youth hockey experience and what it means to kids, especially when you consider that just only a teeny tiny percentage of these kids are ever going to play in the NHL. But it is a really great experience for many of the kids, and even those who never go beyond playing in house leagues. So we're hoping to get him on, and we will revisit this topic and more things to come. Andy Campbell at Andy Campbell 16 on the Twitter, correct?
That's it. That's the one.
At D's DIESAL
3426. That's me.
I like it.
Because I wasn't
at Diesel 3426 on the Twitter. I am at Jaeckel, Jaeckel. Follow our Rink accounts. They're all over the place. If you follow Hawk Twitter, you certainly see we have a very ubiquitous Twitter presence for all of our various Rink Twitter entities. Thank our founding sponsor, puckhockey.com, puckhcky.com. Use the 10% THERINK discount code, buy some gear, good stuff. Thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. Thanks to Andy Campbell. Thanks to Sean Fitzgerald. And we will see you next time on the Rink.
Have a good night.